I have to be honest with you, looking at the news lately, it feels less like reading the paper and more like watching the third act of some disaster movie.
Where the writers just gave up on logic.
Totally. You've
Yeah.
got headlines about the U.S., casually thinking about buying Greenland, or these threats of a 12-day war to wipe out Iran's entire nuclear program.
And suggestions of just snatching world leaders like Maduro right out of Venezuela. It is chaotic. It feels like the guardrails are just gone.
Exactly. And that feeling, that specific sense of, wait, can they do that? That's really the core of what we're digging into today. We are unpacking a pretty heavy conversation with the satirist and political commentator Konstantine Kisin.
Specifically from his recent appearance on The Diary of a CEO.
Right. And this isn't just, a political rant.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Kisin is framing this as a full-on structural collapse.
Yeah.
His argument is that the rules-based order we all think we live in, that post-World War II safety blanket, it's a myth.
A shared myth that's now shattered.
And because we refuse to admit it's gone, he thinks the West is basically sleepwalking into a disaster.
And he covers so much ground. The suicide of the European economy, the terrifying logic of nuclear weapons, and this part really threw me, how AI might ironically force us all back into communism.
It is a massive stack of ideas today. But our mission for this deep dive is to connect those dots. We need to figure out why the world feels like the Wild West all of a sudden.
And whether Kisin thinks there's any way to stop it. So let's start at the foundation, this idea of the shared myth.
Okay, so most of us grow up believing in things like international law.
Yeah, you can't just invade your neighbor. There are rules.
Well, Kisin says none of that is real. He's leaning on the historian Yuval Noah Harari here. The idea is that things like money, borders, laws, they're all shared myths.
They only exist because we all agree to pretend they exist.
Exactly. But Kisin makes a crucial point for geopolitics. A law is only a law if there's a police force to arrest you when you break it.
And there's no global 911 to call?
Precisely. There is no world cop. For decades, the U.S. kind of played that role, voluntarily. But Kisin says since the Soviet Union fell in '91, the West got lazy, complacent.
We thought we'd won history.
We stopped enforcing the rules. And without enforcement, the law just evaporates.
And this is where his take on Donald Trump gets really interesting, because most people see Trump as the cause of the chaos.
The bull in the china shop, yeah.
But Kisin flips that entirely.
He does. He argues Trump isn't the cause, he's the symptom. Kisin suggests Trump is just the first Western leader to openly admit that the fake rules are dead.
So when he talks about taking the oil or buying Greenland...
He's just being transactional. He's saying, look, if China's going to take what it wants and Russia's going to take what it wants, then I'm done pretending the rules apply to me.
So we've shifted from, moral policing to every man for himself?
It's a return to how things have always been, really.
Yeah.
And to explain why it's happening now, Kisin uses this really vivid analogy from the Jungle Book.
The Aquila moment. I've read the book, but I don't remember the specific detail.
It's pivotal. So Aquila is the leader of the wolf pack. In the story, there's this moment during a hunt where Aquila misses his kill. He fails.
Ah.
And the incident happens, the cry goes out through the jungle. Aquila has missed.
And that's the signal.
That's the signal. The hierarchy is broken, the leader is weak. And Kisin says the West had its Aquila moment with the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
It was so messy.
It was messy, chaotic, and it signaled to every predator in the jungle, Putin, Hamas, that the U.S. didn't have the stomach to enforce order anymore.
So a vacuum opens up, chaos rushes in. But while the U.S. is sort of brawling through this new reality, Kisin paints a much, much darker picture for Europe.
Oh, yeah. The suicide of Europe, he calls it.
Is that hyperbole, or does he actually back that up?
The numbers he drops are, well, they're sobering. He points out that Europe has roughly 12% of the world's population, about 25% of global GDP.
Which sounds respectable enough.
Right. But then he hits you with this. Europe accounts for 60% of the world's welfare spending.
Wait, 60? 60? That can't be right. That seems unsustainable.
That's his entire point. He calls it the comfort trap. Because the U.S. was handling defense, Europe just prioritized comfort. They built these huge welfare states instead of, competitive armies or economies.
He really goes after Germany, right?
Oh, he hammers Germany. They shut down their nuclear power plants to rely on cheap Russian gas. It felt virtuous. It felt comfortable.
Until the tanks rolled into Ukraine.
Exactly. And because Germany was so dependent on Russian energy, their first response to the invasion was to offer, 5,000 helmets?
5,000 helmets.
Kisin uses that as the ultimate example of impotence. When you prioritize comfort over reality, you lose all your leverage. You become irrelevant.
And he brings this home to the UK, too. I think he said the UK is now paying almost double its defense budget just on interest.
On debt interest, yeah. It's a sign of a country living way beyond its means. Kisin argues the UK is poorer per capita today than it was 20 years ago.
And he links that to what he calls luxury beliefs.
Right? Policies like really aggressive net zero targets or super high taxes on earners, they sound good at a dinner party, but they kill the economic engine.
And that one specific example about the Revolut founder, that actually made my jaw drop.
Nick Storonsky. Yeah, this is the perfect case study for the brain drain. Storonsky leaves the UK, Kisin does the math, and he estimates that the lost tax revenue from that one person leaving is somewhere around £3 billion.
Okay, hold on. $3 billion from one guy.
Potentially, yeah. And to put that in perspective, Kisin calculated that to replace that lost tax, the government would need to collect income tax from about 450,000 average workers.
That's nearly 500,000 people to replace one entrepreneur.
That is the suicide he's talking about. You demonize success, you tax productivity to pay for that 60% welfare bill, and eventually the most productive people they leave. And you're left with a shrinking pie.
And when the pie shrinks, people get angry.
Exactly. He says all these culture wars over immigration and identity politics are really just proxies for the fact that everyone feels poorer. When there's growth, people are tolerant. When resources are scarce, it turns into a cage match.
So we've got a lawless world and a bankrupt Europe, which brings us to, I think, the scariest part of this deep dive, the nuclear reality.
Yeah, this ties right back to the end of the myth. If international law can't protect you, what can? Kisin says we're moving to a multipolar world: US, China, Russia, a rising India. And in that world, the only real insurance policy is a nuke.
He points to Ukraine again. They gave up their nuclear weapons in the 90s for a piece of paper.
A piece of paper promising security. And they got invaded. The lesson every smaller country is learning right now is if I don't want that to happen to me, I need a nuke.
Which creates this terrifying incentive for everyone to get one.
It does. And Kisin notes that, paradoxically, nukes are the only reason we haven't had World War III yet, mutually assured destruction. But now they're the biggest risk because everyone wants them.
It's a grim picture. But he doesn't stop at geopolitics. He pivots to technology. And this is where the conversation took a really sharp turn for me. AI.
This part was fascinating. He talks about visiting a startup in San Francisco. He saw a robotic arm cooking food.
Right, and robot arms aren't new.
No, we've had them in car factories for ages. But the founder told him the economics have completely flipped. It used to be about the hardware.
Now it's about the brain.
Yes. The hardware is cheap, but the computing power, the brain, needed to make the arm smart enough to, say, crack an egg that used to cost $30,000.
And now?
Now, with AI, that brain costs about 2 cents.
2 cents. That means you can put intelligence into absolutely everything.
Everything. And that leads to Elon Musk's Optimus robots. Kisin's prediction is that within, 3 to 10 years, we're going to see robots that can replace not just manual labor, but skilled jobs. Surgeons, cooks, drivers.
And this leads to the big irony. Kisin, a guy who made his name tearing apart socialism, says AI might make communism inevitable. How does he even get there?
It's just pure logic. If robots do all the work, human labor loses its value. Humans lose their jobs. But if humans have no income, who buys the product the robots are making?
The whole cycle breaks down. You can't have a consumer economy if nobody can consume.
Precisely. So Kisin argues that in that world, some form of wealth redistribution, universal basic income, call it communism, becomes the only way to stop society from collapsing into violence. You can't have 50 people owning the robot armies while billions starve.
He warns that the transition period is going to be incredibly dangerous. Existential angst, he calls it.
Well, think about it. Millions of young people replaced by AI feeling totally useless and broke. That is a breeding ground for extremism. He saw a billboard in Times Square that said, "Stop hiring humans. The age of the AI employee is here."
Wow.
And he's just thinking, do you have any idea what the consequences of that actually are?
And that word consequences, that seems to be the theme of the whole thing.
Yep.
Intentions versus consequences.
That's the core philosophy he gets from the economist Thomas Sowell. Replacing what works with what feels good. Kisin thinks the West is obsessed with policies that make us feel virtuous.
Like net zero or open borders.
Without ever asking, but does this actually work? Can we afford this? What happens next?
He even has a warning for his own side, doesn't he? He talks about the woke right.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's such an important nuance. He sees this reactionary movement on the right, people like Nick Fuentes,
Hmm.
who are basically just adopting the same victimhood mentality as the far left.
They just changed the target?
Yeah, he calls it identitarian victimhood. He warns that if the right just becomes a mirror image of the woke left, you're just fighting fire with fire. You just burn the whole house down. He wants a return to competence, not just a new flavor of extremism.
And he grounds this need for competence in something really personal. He's a father now.
Yes, and that perspective shift is huge for him. He says the future isn't some abstract concept anymore. It's a person. It's his son. Burning it all down isn't a cool slogan when it means destroying your own child's home.
He told a story about Jordan Peterson that really drove this home.
The steak story.
The steak story.
So Kisin was touring with Peterson. They get to this restaurant in El Paso, and they are starving, haven't eaten all day. Peterson orders a huge steak. Just as he picks up his fork,
A group of fans comes up.
20 of them walk up to the table. And most celebrities would say, guys, just give me 5 minutes.
Right, understandably.
But Peterson puts the fork down, stands up, and gives them his full, undivided attention, shakes every hand, takes every photo. And Kisin's takeaway wasn't about politics. It was about discipline.
The discipline to do the hard thing instead of the easy thing.
Exactly. Treating people with dignity, even when you're exhausted and starving. Kisin's point is that the West has lost that discipline. We've been doing the easy thing for 30 years.
It's powerful because it scales up. If you can't discipline yourself to be polite when you're hungry, you probably can't discipline your nation to fix its budget when it's hard.
That's it. It's all about character. And this ties into the demographics issue, which Kisin touches on at the very end. He calls it a demographic death spiral.
Which is the idea that we just aren't having enough kids to sustain our civilization.
Yes, and he brings it back to economics with this great household analogy. Imagine a house with 4 people, all earning 100,000 pounds. That's a wealthy household.
Okay.
Now, you bring in 2 in-laws who don't work but have a small pension. Technically, the total household income might go up a little bit. The GDP of the house went up, but per person.
Everyone is significantly poorer. That's a really clear way to put it.
Right.
We mask our decline by importing people to prop up the headline numbers, while the average person feels their standard of living just slipping away.
And Kisin's argument is that the only way to save Western influence and the values that come with it is to literally reproduce them. A shrinking population is a shrinking power. You need people to carry your values into the future.
It is a harsh diagnosis. I mean, we've covered the collapse of international law, economic suicide, nuclear war, the AI takeover. It is a lot to process. Does he offer any hope, or should we just go live in a bunker?
Well, he calls himself an accelerationist, but not in the burn-it-all-down sense. He believes things have to get bad enough for people to finally wake up.
So the pain is the feature, not the bug. The pain is the alarm clock.
Exactly. We have to stop looking at intentions, what we wish the world was like, and start dealing with the real consequences of reality. It's the entire shift.
So I guess that's the question for you listening today. In a world where the old rules are gone and the jungle is waking up, are you prepared to live in reality? Or are you still banking on a myth that just doesn't exist anymore?
It's time to look at the world as it is, not as we want it to be.
It's a sobering but very necessary deep dive. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.